Welcome to all C3RF members across the nation and indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the viewers from Veterans for Freedom as we transmit through their dedicated TV channels. I'd like to welcome all to another session of In Hot, and in this particular session, we're going to roll in hot on a subject that has really been quite high profile for a number of years now, and that's the prosecution of our medical professionals. And with us today, we're lucky to have a great wingman in the form of Dr. Stephen Malthouse. This will be Stephen's second time with us. He was with us way back in September of 2022. So I thought it'd be opportune to drop in with Dr. Malthouse, see how things have progressed in the last couple of years, and see what's coming up on his particular agenda. So without further ado, just by way of introduction, however, let me say that Dr. Malthouse has been practicing medicine for 45 years. He's not a novice. He was the first BC physician to speak out against the government's public health policies. He is past president of the Canadian Health Alliance, 5,000-member association that was created in response to the seemingly intentional destruction of healthcare across the nation. Stephen has been a strong opponent of the COVID shots for all age groups, and he toured the province with other British Columbia doctors to provide parents with the information required to make an informed choice for children. This was followed by the Justice for the Vaccinated bus tour of BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan to alert Canadians to the dangerous ingredients in the COVID shots and provide solutions for treating COVID jab injuries. Like many of his colleagues, Dr. Malthouse is currently under investigation by his medical college for upholding the Hippocratic Oath and defying the authorities by countering the pandemic propaganda. His medical license was suspended in March of 2022 for writing the vaccine and mask exemptions needed to protect Canadians, especially children and teens, from deadly and unnecessary COVID vaccines that were mandated for employment, travel, school, and sports. Without any further ado, Stephen Malthouse, good day, sir. How are you today?
Hi, Russ. I'm fine. I'm fine out here in British Columbia. We've had lots of things happening, and I'm sure it's right across the country. In fact, around the world, things are being brought in, which seem to be an attempt to really control humans, as far as I can see. And it started off with medicine, but it seems to be going to so many different fields in life these days, from carbon taxes to education to the
Yes.
judiciary.
Yes, it seems to all be coming together in kind of a nefarious fashion, actually. And I note from our first meeting way back in September of 2022, you at that time you noticed some funny shenanigans going on, and even back then you were talking about foreign material and vaccines. And this is a couple of years ago. You said that you had noticed some research that indicated that there were ingredients in the vaccines that perhaps were harmful and shouldn't be there. It looks like that has borne out to be true. Do you have anything further on the latest research on foreign substances and vaccines?
Well, of course, what they found is that there is DNA particles in vaccines, and there is evidence now that those can be incorporated into the recipient's DNA in their cells. That's the big scary part. And what does it mean clinically? We really don't know. In other words, how does it change people's DNA, if it does at all? What's the clinical significance of that? We really don't know yet, but we do know that that was never declared as an ingredient of these vaccines. In fact, when proprietary medicines come out, they don't have to tell you what's in them. And so we really did not know all the ingredients in the COVID shots. I think back in 2022, we were probably looking at what appeared to be nanotechnology in those days, and metals, heavy metals, which should not have been in there, could not have been created from shavings from the machines or anything like that. Some of them were toxic heavy metals. And different locations around the world, different scientists have found different ingredients, which suggests that the lots were not all the same. And
No.
there is evidence too that probably at least 3 different categories based on the mortality figures for each one. In other words, how many deaths have occurred after each of the COVID shots. That's not including the injuries. That's just the deaths. So there seemed to be at least 3 different, some which were highly dangerous in terms of causing death to the recipients, and others which were moderately dangerous, and some which may have been close to placebo. It seems like there were at least 3 experiments going on simultaneously.
It sounds like certainly quality control is kind of an issue with the whole thing. I've also done some reading and see that some of the ingredients they're finding, or DNA fragments they're finding, are what they call SV40 simian virus fragments, which accordingly apparently have a propensity to cause cancer, or enable the onset of cancer in people who wouldn't normally experience such. But along with that, at the same time, when we had our first interview, you talked about the fact that we talked about dying suddenly. You mentioned the fact that back then there were Canadian doctors who all of a sudden were just kind of having problems and dying very, very suddenly. Is that situation, is that been resolved? Has it changed? What's happening along in those lines?
Well, I think a lot of people have decided not to take these shots any further, not to take boosters. So that's a big change from when initially this dying suddenly was first brought to our attention by Dr. William Mackis of Alberta. And
Yeah.
the thing about doctors dying suddenly was that these are doctors really in the prime of their life. Some of them were athletes, and they were dying either while running or swimming, or they would some were dying in their sleep. It was thought to due to a cardiac arrhythmia, which is occurring with increased adrenaline and noradrenaline from exercise, that these people probably had myocarditis, and they had a reentrance phenomenon with regard to electricity of the heart, and that's what caused them to have sudden heart attacks. We were seeing that also on the football field as well, and that was the reason in fact, we went to the Grey Cup in our bus to hand out pamphlets to let people know that this was a risk to anyone who played sports who'd had the shots, particularly young people, it seemed, and that teenagers were dying and on the field and or on the hockey rink. So we felt it was really important. So we got on the bus here in British Columbia, and we traveled all the way out to Saskatchewan to let people know about this. And I was accompanied by Dr. Hoff at the time and our crew, and we handed out thousands of brochures to let people know about this phenomenon. But we're not seeing it so much anymore, but we are seeing a lot of injuries that are creeping up on people, and some which occurred right away. And of course, the medical profession still is in large ignoring these, or gaslighting patients, telling them it's all in their head. But
Yes.
many doctors don't know what to do.
So I noticed that perhaps the people are taking fewer doses of these vaccines, and maybe that's things have tailed off a bit. But I'm also noting that across the Western world, anyway, the nations that are highly vaccinated seem to be having excess death rates that are really off the clock. We're talking about 15, 20, 25% increase in excess deaths. I think of England in particular, and we have there's a member of Parliament there, Brigden, who speaks out again on this excess deaths. He is not being listened to, but he is gaining traction. Do you see anything like that in Canada? Do you follow the excess death situation in Canada? Because quite frankly, I find it very difficult to find data associated with anything along those lines.
Yeah, the trouble with Canada is we have a very poor reporting system for vaccine injuries, and although it is compulsory to do it, once doctors have submitted these their reports about a vaccine injury, it's often ignored. I wouldn't say ignored as much as critiqued based on a scale which puts all of them as a coincidence. So it's very hard to have collected information here in Canada. We don't have robust systems for collecting. But even the United States, for example, the VAERS reports, which show these excess deaths and other types of injuries from these COVID shots, only captures about 1%. Maybe more, but a research many years ago actually showed that about 1% of reports were actually sent in. So you can multiply that times 100. Some people say multiply it times 40 to get the real numbers, but it's still occurring. I think everybody knows someone who's been injured by these shots. And on our little island, Denman, we've had a lot of people found dead in their greenhouses or in their fields, sudden deaths, which no one seems to be able to explain, and people who are previously healthy and active.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people are noticing those around them seem to be coming up with funny maladies, funny problems that shouldn't exist in a person of their age and health. I've seen it personally myself, and I'm quite concerned. And I think Brigden in Britain seems to be hitting a chord there, because I was watching him give a speech in Parliament, and it was very sparsely attended. There were a couple of MPs who bothered to attend,
Shocking.
but apparently the galleries were full. And when he finished his talk about excess deaths, the crowd in the gallery just went crazy and were clapping and cheering and hurrah. And the speaker had to put a stop to it, because it was not parliamentary, I guess.
It does show,
But
Russ, it does show the disconnect between the general population and what they're seeing and what they would applaud. In other words, someone stepping up and telling the truth,
yes,
compared to the parliamentarians who, just are absent. I know I saw that speech he's given a couple now, and Malcolm Brigden, and the legislature is empty. There's only a few seats taken, and it's shocking. We're seeing the same thing here in Canada, particularly in British Columbia, in our government. They seem to be completely disconnected from the people that elected them.
they are totally out of touch. Your personal experience when you went on your bus tour across Western Canada, what was the response that you received from the public?
Well, our last time in 2022 is when we were traveling, and we would have people coming up to us in the parking lots and telling us their stories, and we had sellout crowds. I mean, it was free to come and listen to us speak, because we were really out there to provide information so people could have give informed consent, which was not being asked because no one was being informed of what were the consequences, the risk and benefits of these shots and the alternatives. So we actually found that people were very receptive. And one thing back then that we found is that people were very thankful for someone who would tell them that they weren't crazy. In other words, the things they were experienced were genuine, and they were related to the shots as they suspected, and yet they were being told by the medical professionals that this was not the case. Shots were safe and effective. Just keep on going and taking the boosters. But they knew better. But even people in their family were telling them, "Oh no, it's all in your head. You're a conspiracy theorist," that type of thing. So I think one of the main things that we did out there was we were telling people that what you're observing is correct, and using common sense is sometimes better than doctors just reading journals which are completely captured, such as the Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, and the American Medical Association Journal. They're all been captured for so many years by the pharmaceutical companies. It's really a joke.
Well, I think
it's the main source for doctors.
I think in the Canadian sense, I think since 1994, at any rate, the pharmaceutical industry used to fund about 50% of Health Canada, but since that time, I see the figures now. They're like upwards of 90%. 90% of Health Canada's funding is coming from the big pharmaceutical companies. And if that's not a conflict of interest, I really don't know what is. That is absolutely incredible. But there seems to be what I perceived going on is there was up front, there was a remnant. There was a small group of professionals like yourself, like Dr. Hoff, like Mary O'Connor, Dr. Trozy, very, very few of you willing to put your Hippocratic Oath on the line and tell it the way you saw it and the way you researched it yourself. And that remnant now seems to be generating what I call a cognitive dissonance within the population at large. The vast majority of people have gone along with the narrative. It must be conspiracy theory what these people are coming up with. But now with their own personal experiences and seeing, there are stories starting to drib and drab out to talk about foreign elements within the vaccines, and now we're starting to see a little bit of cognitive dissonance kick in, and I see the remnant becoming bigger, becoming larger. What would you say about that? Is it getting any easier for you?
Well, it's not I'm kind of what we've learned these last 4 years is how to communicate, because when people have been so badly brainwashed and frightened to the point where they're not thinking anymore. They're more or less reacting, and they're so susceptible because of that to propaganda that it's really gone into a part of the brain which is not able to figure this out using the intellect. And so when you speak to people like that, you can't really just give them facts. They can't take them in, or they shut down because they're really in a fight or flight mode. This use of fear and repetition in regard to brainwashing has been the job of our mainstream media, which has been bought out by the government, which appears to be almost control from outside the country. It's very hard to explain their policies otherwise. But what we're finding now is that people are starting to see the dots, but they haven't connected them. And our job now is to help people to recognize who the real enemy is here. And
I think what you're talking about there is you're talking about actually weaponizing psychology to use it against a population writ large. That's a pretty sinister stuff. But it's not impossible. We've seen it happen in the past. We've seen, in the 20th century, we saw a lot of that going on with fascism, communism, and so it does exist. This weaponization of psychology is a known fact, and to think that it would be applied to Canadians, Americans, the Western world writ large is actually very incredible, and that'd be hard for anybody to wrap their mind around. But there it is. And let's talk about when we talk about governments operating against the well-being of the population they represent. I look at Bill 36 in British Columbia, and I see a lot of sinister stuff in that bill. And you're right in the midst of that regime, that medical regime. How do you see Bill 36? What is it got anything to do with medicine?
Oh, well, that was passed. Bill 36 was passed in November 2022, and it's now the Health Professions and Occupations Act. It replaces a previous one. And but they brought in all sorts of aspects to this. It's a vaguely written act, but it does include a lot of things which would discourage doctors from coming to British Columbia, cause some to escape the province, others to burn out. And this act is designed really to corral doctors and to stop them from speaking about anything that is not a government policy. So there are huge fines for doctors that don't toe the line, up to $500,000 and 2 years imprisonment for a doctor that speaks about I would say medical conditions that don't and does not speak the government policy. So that would be maybe to do with vaccines. Now that's what it costs for an incorporated doctor. So it's a doctor. Most doctors are incorporated here in British Columbia. Other things they can do too is they can come and if there's an anonymous complaint, they can come and lock the doctor's office immediately while awaiting an investigation. They can access patients' charts, and they can just come in and take a patient's chart at will. What else can they do? Oh, they can take your license away if you don't accept a mandated medical procedure like a vaccine.
This is all. Sorry, Dr. Malthouse. This is all unconstitutional. You can't. People have privacy rights. They have medical records that deserve to be their private property. You're talking about walking into a doctor's office and taking things that's unconstitutional. It's illegal search and seizure. It's right out of the charter. It seems how could a law be passed in any province that is so blatantly unconstitutional? Wasn't there a challenge to it?
No, there hasn't been a challenge. In fact, it hasn't been implemented yet, even though it was passed in 2022. It's probably the thought is it's going to be implemented in June of this year because it was vaguely written and it had to be filled in. The blanks, had to be filled in behind closed doors, and that's what they've been doing. So this bill was written by the NDP, who are in power here in British Columbia, the Green Party, and the Liberals assisting. It took them about 3 years, but mean, we have it from illegal sources that this bill was not written inside the country, or at least not in the province, and
Oh,
it's going to come across Canada. They're already applying a similar one now. I think it's Bill 21 to the lawyers,
oh,
and they've done it to the dentists as well. Essentially, it's a way of curtailing free speech and also individualization of medicine. So if a patient came to me and I thought that in their taking their personal history that would not be appropriate to recommend the traditional treatment that was so to say dictated by the government,
yep.
then I would not be able to say that to them, except at the risk of losing my license. So, a patient could report you. I mean, patients reported their doctors for not wearing masks or for telling them, hey, you don't need to wear a mask. Patients or their relatives would report the doctor, and some of them were brought up in front of the college. So you can imagine it's going to be a bit like 1984, that you
Well,
won't be able to speak out because you won't know who's going to turn you in. And of course, that would be your livelihood. They could shut you down immediately and take away your license. So it's a pretty heavy-handed
that makes
law.
it makes the practice of medicine, I would think, an impossibility. I mean, it completely blows up the whole concept of doctor-patient confidentiality. When we talk about a bureaucracy telling you how to treat a patient, where you're talking about one size fits all, and one size fits all doesn't. That's not what medicine is about, because everyone's an individual. Everyone has, as you say, has an individual history that needs to be taken into consideration. Now, you talk about offshore, and I'm looking at uh, this World Health Organization pandemic treaty that is currently in the works. They're going to be discussing it at the World Health Assembly, 77th World Health Assembly, between, I think it's 27 May and 1 June, just a few weeks from now. And that pandemic treaty and the associated international health regulations are basically, if they go through the way they're in draft form, are going to take medical sovereignty and actual national sovereignty away from nations and hand them over to the international outfit in the form of the WHO. So this does seem to be some sort of a coordinated type globalist type movement effort to take charge of our most sacred institutions.
Yeah. Well, the WHO is really, an arm of the United Nations, and this is we have also UNDRIP in Canada, which is this BC is the only place where that has been passed. It's now called
Mm-hmm.
DRIP because it is an act. And they seem to be wanting to get their hands on everything to take over control of different countries. And you're right, there'd be a loss of sovereignty. Medical method coming in through the medical door is often the easiest way to get started. This happened in World War II, with the idea of the Jews being unclean and carrying a pestilence and that type of thing, and then segregating them, and then it went on from there. So yeah, that's the way it's planned. So the international health regulations and the pandemic treaty have a couple of different sides to them. One is they take away sovereignty based on the fact that the WHO can declare a pandemic, or they can declare an emergency, or they can declare a suspected pandemic emergency. That's one
Yes.
thing. Plus, they also want to control the money that then gets dished out around the world. And another aspect too is that they want to create laboratories in all these countries where they can pick up things and pick up, let's say, a bacterium in the sewage, and therefore declare that there's a suspicion that it could be a pandemic coming, and so therefore we're going to start rolling out the same public health measures that they did before, distancing and masks and vaccinations. And so the idea behind that is there's a lot of money to be made. Now, if the
Yeah.
countries that say, hey, you've got to declare a pandemic in your country, and they say, well, where do I get the money from to do that? Well, you can borrow it from us. So it's actually a money grab as well that the WHO will control. So there's many aspects to this. Not just can they come in and tell you what to do, but they can also act as the bankers to give you the money to do it.
Well,
It's really not good. And if it gets passed, well, we're even more behind the eight ball than we are right now.
Well, what really frightens me is I look at the treaty and the regulations. They talk about a concept called One Health, And the One Health concept means that human health has to be balanced away or balanced off with plant health, with the planet's health, with the health of animals. So it's all just one health organization, and it's planetary type effort. And here you get into, okay, what can impact planetary health? Well, climate change can impact planetary health. And now all of a sudden you've got the camel's nose under the tent with regards to climate change, perhaps authorizing the WHO to initiate a related pandemic and emergency and shut us down or control our carbon footprints so that we can address this climate One Health problem.
Yeah.
It's nefarious.
Well, climate health, we've known this for some time, that climate crisis. First of all, it was climate freezing, and then now it's climate warming, and now apparently the ocean's boiling. But climate change has been used has also been weaponized. In other words, they're really, look at the statistics, temperature of the planet, ice flows, but also things such as sea level rise, or the absence of it. We can see that this was all, again, a kind of a narrative very similar to the COVID narrative, to try to drive policies which are designed to control humans and humanity. And when you really look at the statistics, you find it, there may be a slight rise in the sea level. I think in Victoria, British Columbia, where they've been measuring the sea level in Inner Harbor for more than 100 years, that it goes up 1 millimeter per year. So by 2050, it's going to go up a total of like 2.2 centimeters. And that's all, so you don't have to sell your oceanside property quite yet,
No, people are still buying property in Florida, and as far as last I saw, they're still buying property in Martha's Vineyard. There doesn't seem to be stopping people from enjoying those parcels of land.
Those are the wealthy people.
So we have the situation here where you talk about narratives, and these narratives get spun, and they get spun to the point where they're a truth unto themselves. And I'm thinking about your case, and I'm thinking about Dr. Hoff's case, because I've seen both of you are under disciplinary proceedings because you have had the temerity to speak out against the path that we're going down in the medical world. And I see that in Dr. Hoff's case, I think he's under proceedings now, but they've been delayed. He's got a number of expert witnesses that he's bringing on board, world-renowned witnesses that are going to support his side of the argument. And I was taking a look at it, and it's been delayed because the government has dumped a whole bunch of information on him and his lawyers that he has to go through. But the prosecution is asking that he be punished, and that his witnesses not be allowed to testify because they claim judicial notice. Judicial notice is a legal concept where everyone agrees that certain facts are undeniable, they can't be disputed. The sky is blue, the grass is green, those types of things. They could be entered into court without having to prove they meet any kind of evidentiary threshold. Now, what the courts are doing is they're saying, well, we've got this climate change, we've got vaccines, we've got all these things that cannot be disputed. You cannot even submit evidence against them because they are rock solid, sky is blue type of facts. How do you fight that kind of a fight if you're up against that kind of regulatory corruption, I guess?
Well, it's very difficult. I think, first of all, you have to realize that, if you stand on your own integrity, that there's nothing that can really hurt you. So it's when you compromise that the problems start. But yeah, I think we've been seeing this for the last 2 years since the court's judiciary seems very much the same. Judicial notice, as you say, means that everyone recognizes the sky is blue, so we're not going to argue that in court. And public health people have been, and the CDC have been given, essentially carte blanche to do whatever they like because they're the authorities, the experts. And of course, again, we're seeing that the general population, a significant part of them, I hear every day of more people that I never realized have figured out what's happening here. And but the general population is starting to wake up, and so it means it's a groundswell that's going to change things. It's not going to come from the top down. In fact, we have to change this. We have to decentralize and take it down to the grassroots if we're going to make changes that are going to be that are really going to be different. Now, every revolution has kind of had that, where the farmers revolt type of thing. But there is an issue here that if you do that, the pyramid gets flattened out temporarily, then builds up to a pyramid again where you have the elites at the top. So we have to try to figure out this time round, because this may be the last time round based on the level of technology that we're up against here, is that by that I mean surveillance pretty much.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that we have to figure out a way that to prevent this from coming to into the pyramid shape in the future, because then we're just gonna go another round of the same thing, right? But we never escape. So that's kind of comes down to a bit of more of the moral, ethical aspects of things, right?
Yes. We need, we can't, I don't think we could survive another zero COVID operation. Like we went through zero COVID, we locked down, we vaccinated everybody, and we just caused so much damage. Now we've got inflation that's out of control. Now we've got housing that's out of control. Now we got people are lining up at food. It's starting to look like the Depression of the 30s now, all because we took this approach, this zero COVID approach, which was handed to us by maybe the Chinese Communist Party and their friends at the World Health Organization, but was acceded to by our own leaders and our own political representatives. And so if we don't change this whole thing now, if we don't realize the mistakes we made now, then when we have this next emergency, we're going to do the same thing all over again. And I don't think we could survive a second round of this kind of approach. Maybe that's the whole purpose of the WHO pandemic treaty. I don't know, but it's nefarious.
If we get through this one, because they're still bringing things on. I mean, they're just ramping up bird flu scares, and they've even got monkeypox returning in certain parts of the world, and they're trying to cull our chickens and things like this, and now talking about bird flu in cows, and so they're going to go after your cows. They're trying to control the water here. I don't know if you're aware, but there is this Bill 31, which, well, I know you are aware of it, Bill 31 here in British Columbia, which was passed in November 2023, and people hardly noticed it, but it's a new Emergency Management Act. And what it means is that with the declaration of a climate change emergency or contagion emergency, or that we have some kind of a threat with bombs and so forth, terrorist threat, that the government, pretty much the minister on a whim, can seize your house, your property, your land, your trees, your crops, your water supply, everything. And so it means that it doesn't take much now, and everyone's used to them declaring emergencies right, left, and center without any evidence, that they don't even have to go through the courts to do it. They can just do it, and the fines include imprisonment and large, like $1 million fines, $300,000 fines for people who resist. I think it's coming out under the guise of, well, we've got wildfires, we can't let people die in fires or whatever. And but again, it's one of these things which is being brought in by the NDP government here, and assisted by the Liberals and the Greens, and they're trying to essentially take away your property whenever they want.
It's absolutely unconstitutional, and absolutely insidious and nefarious. It's that Bill 31 is really ringing a lot of alarm bells there. Wow. Okay,
it'll come across Canada, just like the Bill 36, the Health Professional Occupations Act. It's rolling across the country. You'll see it in Ontario pretty soon, and the same thing with every act. I think British Columbia is where they put up trial balloons. Maybe because we have a sort of a liberal population, or we have an older population. I'm not sure which, that is more susceptible to these type of ploys. But
when you look at it,
roll across.
Yeah, when you look at it, it seems like now that I think of it, almost every piece of legislation that comes forward these days, at the federal or provincial level, they all seem to be aimed at taking some right away. Some civil liberty seems to be up for grabs with each piece of legislation. The one I'm thinking about right now is Bill C 63 at the federal level, which talks to hate speech,
Yes,
and which can actually put people under wraps and in house arrest if someone thinks they're even thinking about something hateful. Like this is just absolute 1984 in steroids.
it
And
is.
so, and we talked about the international WHO pandemic treaty and the regulations. They have stipulations in them that say that nations are responsible for quashing any kind of dissent that speaks against these pandemic measures and rules.
Yeah.
So actually, every time we get a piece of legislation now, it's taking something away, and it's just this all can't be coincidence, can it? I mean, it's just too much going on.
Yeah, no, this
But
is not by
just my
accident.
opinion.
It's a step. It's a step. They call it tiptoe to tyranny. It's a step by step, and inch by inch. And the idea is to do it in such a way that the general population doesn't become aware of it until it's too late, until the cell door, clangs shut. That's the idea. But the hate speech one, I agree that is really ominous. And if that means that if someone suspects you of hate speech, or that you could use hate speech in the future
Yeah,
online, that you could then be imprisoned for life. That's
absolutely incredible. Yeah,
that's a lot of
like oh my God, this is
for life.
it's. I mean, it's fiction isn't this crazy. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy.
And they have this
As
in
we
they have this in Scotland already. They've passed this in
Yes,
Scotland,
yes, they did.
and
Yeah.
hate speech law. And apparently they're just overwhelmed with people snitching on each other, making up stories. There's an example of a woman who was handcuffed and taken down to the police station because her neighbor said she'd said something hateful to her, which she had never actually said. And it was just essentially a neighborhood feud. And this is the way people will act. I know that in World War II, people used to denounce the Jews and their neighbors for harboring Jews and things like that.
Mhm.
So human
Yeah.
nature needs to be addressed.
Yeah, like you say, weaponized psychology at play in a very large fashion. But I think they call it turnkey tyranny. That was a phrase that was came up by an ex NSA operative. I forget his name, but he called it turnkey tyranny, where you put all the pieces in place, and so that people don't see what's going on. They're all disparate pieces that are put in place, and all of a sudden you get them all in place, and then you just turn the key and clang, as you say, the door is shut and you're done. You're trapped and you're inside yourself. But anyway, for yourself, sir, what can our audience do to help you? Where can they go to see where you're telling your story? How can we help?
Well, I'm not really telling my story very much because there are more important things really that need to be done. And as I mentioned, I think this is going to be a grassroots change,
Mhm.
and we have to work from the bottom up. So that means that if people want to help me, they can help themselves, and that means figuring things out, connecting the dots, and speaking to their neighbors, and speaking to them in a way which is gentle, because everyone has been psyoped here. It's been an incredible propaganda machine, probably one of the best, I would say, best from the point of view of effective marketing ploys that we've ever experienced. It's on a global level. So
Yeah.
to undo it, we need to start from the bottom up. It won't come from politicians, although we can find the politicians which represent us and hold their feet to the fire if they get in office. We need to get out and vote if there's somebody who is speaking the truth. And I know here in British Columbia, we have some independents, and we also have the BC Conservatives who who are actually going to protect, I think, defend us, the populace, and represent us. And
Very,
so
very important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so people have to get out and vote for sure. But I think also there's an issue of morality here, and that means that people need to work on themselves. They need to examine themselves and whether they feel how they feel about when greed pops up or selfishness pops up in some way. Do they like that? In other words, is that a comfortable position to be in, or is it's another form of suffering? And do they feel better when they're helping other people or doing things in a selfless way? And when they start to recognize what their conscience is telling them is the right thing to do, then they can use that as their guide to going forward. But without awakening of conscience and knowing what is the right thing, how to act, then we will have trouble. That pyramid will reestablish itself after we have the so-called revolution. So I think that's kind of the key is people have to work on themselves, and they have to also work with their neighbors, like reform community, despite the fact that it was sort of driven dashed, let's say, by the psychological operation that was pulling everyone to turn the
People
vaccinated
were
to the
broken.
unvaccinated, the masked versus the unmasked, and so on. I think that's
Yeah,
where we need to go.
people were dislocated and separated from each other. Now we have to come together. And as you say, talk to your neighbor, shine a light on what you see going on, and that hopefully will create this cognitive dissonance in your neighbor to have them think twice about what's actually happening and what they need to do themselves to make things better. Well, that's a very interesting discussion, Stephen, and we wish you all the best with your travails, you and people like you, Dr. Hoff, as you proceed with your court cases and disciplinary proceedings. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye for now.
Cheers.